Hi guys, UK Guns here. So in this video I'm going to be showing you how to strip and reassemble the Kral Arms XPS 12 magazine fed semi-automatic shotgun. So if you're not sure what this gun is, I've made a video before on my channel about it and I'll leave a link to that video in the description. So if you want to know more about the gun, go ahead and check that link out below. In this video I'm just going to show you how to strip and reassemble the gun. So first and foremost, we're going to make sure the gun is clear. So remove the magazine. Remove the safety cap, which on this gun is a little bit tricky, it's a bit stiff. Cock that, make sure it's clear and it's empty, which it is. And then we're not going to fire off the action because we want to leave the hammer cocked for when we strip the gun. So we do need a couple of tools for stripping this gun, which are these ones here. These come with the gun. I know that's going to be a bone of contention for a lot of people. It is for me. Needing tools to strip your gun is never kind of ideal because you can lose them, forget to take them with you, whatever the case. It's much better to have a kind of toolless way of stripping the gun. Now, with the exception of the sight rail, but that's the same for most guns, you're probably going to need a tool to take your sight rail off. You probably could get away without this tool, but it does make life easier, and I'll show you when we get to it why that is. But the first thing we need is just an Allen key to remove this sight rail. So this side saddle sight rail, very common on this style of kind of AK, which is what this gun is based on. Essentially, it's an AK receiver. So because of the dust cover on the AK, you can't mount a sight on top of there. There are some modern variants that do allow you to do that, but majority of them you can't because it wouldn't hold zero. And so the way they came up with being able to mount an optic on this is using one of these side saddle, sort of side mount. And that's a pretty good workaround, but the downside is obviously that needs to come off every time you strip the gun down because the dust cover needs to come off, and that's underneath the sight. So all we need to do is loosen off these two Allen keys. I won't remove them completely, these two Allen screws, just loosen them off so I can slide the rail off. Now there is kind of concern about would it hold zero like when you put the sight back on. Probably not, but at the same time, so long as you mount it back in the exact same place. So with this one, I mount it as far forward as I can possibly put it, so all the way until it stops, and then tighten it down there. So theoretically, if you put it back in that exact same location, because the sight itself doesn't come off of the sight mount, theoretically it should still hold zero, but of course it's never going to be exact because you have messed around with the sight, you've moved it off, so it's never going to be exact. But now remembering what this is, it's a shotgun. Even firing slug, you're not firing this out to super long ranges. If this was a long range target rifle, then yeah, absolutely, when you take that mount off you're going to need to re-zero it. But for a target shotgun, you're shooting it mostly at 50 yards or less, sometimes maybe 100, 150, but not often, then for the most part, you probably don't need to re-zero it. But of course, if you really want to make sure you've got a good zero every single time, then yeah, you can re-zero it, sure. But I haven't got a huge amount of time behind this gun, but the couple of times I have removed it and fired it again afterwards, I haven't needed to re-zero and it seems fine. But I'd really need to get a bit more time behind it before I could say definitively one way or the other. But I think, like I say, as long as you make sure when you mount it back on, it's in the exact same place as it was when you took it off, you should be okay. So to take it off, I've loosened off those screws. I'm then just going to push it back towards the back of the gun. It's a little bit stiff on that rail, and then that just comes off. And then all I need to do from here is remove the dust cover. So the dust cover basically has a plunger at the back here, just like any AK. The difference with this plunger, it has another additional plunger on top. I'll show it to this camera here. So it has another additional plunger on top, which is what the tool is for. That's more for when you come to put it back together again later. But you can use it to help you take it off. But I find two fingers, you push this plunger down, that plunger in. It's a bit fiddly, but you can do it, and the dust cover comes off. Now, I'm not sure why they've included that plunger on top there. I've spoke about this, I think, before in another video. The only thing I can think of is that they were worried that with the slightly higher recoil of 12 gauge, that somehow the main plunger itself could kind of rattle itself inside the dust cover, because if it did that, the dust cover could fly off. Now, that seems unlikely to me, but that's kind of the only reason why I think they would put that extra plunger on there, because it seems like it's there to stop that main plunger from being able to go inside the dust cover without that top one being pressed. So that's the only thing I can think of. I'm not entirely sure why they put it on there. If anyone does know, please leave a comment below, but I suspect it's something along those lines. Now, to remove this part, which is the recoil rod and spring assembly, all we need to do is offset that plunger from a little recess that it sits in. Now, the spring is in 2 parts. That's not always the case with AKs. Sometimes it's one whole spring, but on this one it's in 2 parts. It's just worth bearing in mind and being careful when we take it out because it's obviously under tension. So just push that forward, offset it, and then pull it out. So there you go. So it's come out as one, but those are 2 different springs. So you see those there. So I'll just place those down. And then from here, the next thing we need to do is take out our bolt carrier assembly. Nice and easy. We're simply going to grab the cocking handle. We're going to pull it all the way rearward, right to the back of the gun, and then offset it to pull it out, because this is what's called a long stroke gas piston. So it's quite a long piston that it has on top that goes into the gas tube, which runs along the top here, and that's how the gun cycles. So we need to pull it all the way rearward, offset it, and pull it out. Like so. You can then take the bolt itself out just by rotating it and then pulling it outwards like so. Now for this part here, this is the bolt carrier. It's essentially the same as an AK-47 bolt carrier. In fact, I have a suspicion it is just an AK bolt carrier that they've modified, because if you notice this part here, they've cut this away, obviously to make room for the larger 12 gauge shell, which suggests that obviously this wasn't originally designed for 12 gauge because they've had to mill away part of it. And you can tell it's kind of been milled like that rather than manufactured that way. So I think that's just an AK gas piston that they've modified. But again, let me know in the comments. Obviously the bolt itself is for the 12 gauge, so that's different, and the same for the recoil spring. Now that's pretty much it. Nice and easy to strip down. You can remove this barrel shroud here, heat shroud, but all that does is it just gives you access to the outside of the barrel. So if you wanted to, coat the barrel or something to protect it, you can take that off to do that. I'm not going to do that because it's got like the longest thread in the world. We'll be here all day while I'm unscrewing it. Other than that though, that's pretty much everything you need. You can get obviously into your barrel down here, into your gas tube in here, and your trigger group in there. Now most of this is kind of standard AK, the trigger group, this the hammer, the pistol grip. So you can swap those out if you wanted to. Nice and easy to clean, very industrial looking. I'll show that to that camera there. Big old springs in there. And again, that's just standard. That's not been beefed up for 12 gauge or anything along those lines. That's pretty much how most AKs are from the factory. So once you've done that, obviously you can clean it, do whatever you need to do, and then we need to put it back together again. So it's basically the same in reverse. So we're going to start off with our bolt carrier. So we're going to put our bolt back in. So all we need to do is just make sure we line up the lug with there's a groove in here. We need to make sure we line up the lug on the bolt with that, because that's what rotates the bolt when it locks, basically. And then what we're going to do is, I'll show it to this camera, there's some rails in the back here. We need to make sure that these grooves on here line up and they go in those rails, because you can, if you're not careful, sit the bolt carrier on top of those rails, and as you slide it forward, obviously the piston will be in the gas tube. It will sort of force the back of the bolt carrier down, and you could damage or bend those rails. So just be really careful that it's on the rails properly, and the best way to do that is when you put it in, when it's right at the back of the gun here, push it down a little bit. You'll feel a little bit of resistance, which is from the hammer, a little bit of sort of springiness to it, and then you just slide it all the way forward, and then that is sitting on the rails. So I'll show you again, because if you come up, when it's sort of right the way back here, like that, now that's on top of the rails. So if I was to kind of force that forward, it would sort of crush down on those rails, which they'd probably be okay, but I wouldn't want to risk it, and you certainly wouldn't want to do it too many times. So really you need to make sure it is on those rails just by pushing that down and then sliding it forward like so. Nice and easy. Then taking that front spring, that's just the spring piece on its own, and place that into the back of the bolt carrier. We're then going to take our recoil rod and spring, and we're going to put that, line that up with that spring, and then into that recess in the back of the gun in here. Like so. And just make sure that's in correctly. Happy with that. The next part is the slightly fiddly part, because we need to refit the dust cover, sorry. There's a little lip in the front here that we're going to hook the front of the dust cover into. And then with most AKs, normally now you kind of just push in this back plunger, the spring, and then just push the dust cover down until it clicks into place. But because of that extra plunger on top, it's not quite that straightforward, and that's where this tool comes into play. It's basically using the tool to push down on that top plunger whilst we sort of fiddle it in. It is fiddly, it is annoying. I wish it wasn't there, but it is. So we've just got to put up with it. But making sure that the dust cover stays in place, then all we need to do is sort of pushing that in and then using that tool, like I say, until it clicks into place. You could do that without the tool. You could do that with your fingers. I have tried it, I have managed it, but it's very fiddly. Because your fingers are too big to kind of fit in through that gap and push that plunger, whereas the tool is obviously designed to do that. So it's much easier with that. And the thing is, that's like a proprietary tool. So if you lose that, I mean, you could probably fashion something or use a screwdriver, a flathead or something along those lines. You could probably do that just fine, but still a bit annoying. But yeah, is what it is. So the next part we need to do, you can just check the functions of the gun, make sure everything works. Cock's fine. Safety catch works fine. Remove the safety catch. Checking all of that. Make sure you're happy with that. Once that's done, then we're going to put our sight back on. Now, this is what I said about earlier, about making sure we put the sight back on in the same location that we took it off from. And for me, that's just as far forward as it goes. So I'm just going to take the sight, mount it on that rail, and then just slide it all the way forward until it stops and give it a good push. Make sure that's mounted all the way on there. And then what I do, I tighten these screws down, but I don't tighten one down all the way. I kind of give them a couple of turns each at a time. And that's just to make sure that they tighten down equally, so that one screw doesn't go tight and kind of pull the mount off, you know, because that could affect your zero as well. So just trying to make sure that I do that equally as possible. And then once I'm happy, just a little bit extra. You don't need to over tension these, don't go crazy, because you can end up crushing your rail or the mount itself. So it doesn't need to be super tight, but just enough so they're not going to work their way loose, because obviously there's quite a bit of recoil on a 12 gauge. And there you go, that is basically it, how to strip and reassemble the Kral Arms XPS 12 semi-automatic shotgun. Hope you found this video useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already, subscribe. Thanks for watching.